as I mentioned earlier, I just want to discuss this flowering staff episode a little bit more because I think it gets lost a little bit in all the other miracles and drama of Parshat Korach. I don't know how a flowering staff stacks up in our mind against a pit that opened up in the ground and swallowed everyone up. Although there is a tradition actually in a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that there's this list of miraculous creations that was created on the eve of the first Shabbat, so on the sixth day of creation, right before God kind of closed the door on creating new things. There's a list of 10 things that were created, and 2 of the things that are mentioned on that list are actually the pit that swallowed Korach and his followers, and Aaron's miraculously blooming staff. So it's worth taking a minute or two to think about. And I think there is a lot of complexity in the imagery described of the flowering staff of Aaron. Staffs or staves, which I think might perhaps be the technically correct term, they have their own associations for us. We all probably have our own images in our head of wizened elders leaning on a staff for support. But it's worth remembering that the staffs of Moses and Aaron were also where God's power often flowed through them and showed itself. In the signs before the people and Pharaoh in Egypt, in the plagues Moses and Aaron brought down on Egypt, and in the splitting of the sea on the way out of Egypt. Or if you want an image from a figure outside of the Jewish canon, we can think of Gandalf, the wizard in The Lord of the Rings, who, sometimes is a kindly old man with a walking stick until it is revealed that he too has powerful magic attached to that very same staff. So it's notable here that the transformation of Aaron's staff is the sign that puts the conflict of this morning's Parsha to bed, and not with another plague or a miracle with shockwaves resonating out like the splitting of the sea, but benignly with what I would call a gentle miracle, growth and regrowth and natural beauty, as Aaron's staff sprouts leaves, flowers, and yes, almonds. If we look closely at the text, however, some of the wording around specifically the staff is vague. In chapter 17, verses 17 and 18, God says to Moses, "Speak to the Israelite people and take from them, from the chieftains of their ancestral houses, 1 staff for each chieftain of an ancestral house. Also inscribe Aaron's name on the staff of Levi." For all of the emphasis in the book of Exodus on Moses and Aaron's personal staffs, here, God appears to be referencing a more generic set of staffs, something that perhaps each tribe kept as part of its ritual or leadership objects. There is a midrashic story and explanation that expands on that theory. A midrash says that Moses took 1 piece of wood and cut it into 12 different staffs, and said to the head of the tribes, "All of you from the same piece of wood, take your staff." Why did Moses do this? As it says in Proverbs 20, verse 3, "It is honorable for a man to desist from strife, but every fool becomes embroiled." Moses did this so that the other leaders wouldn't say that the staff of Aaron was damp or freshly cut, and that is how and why it flowered. The idea that Moses cut all of these staffs from 1 piece of wood and that they were selected and created especially for this ritual speaks to just how severe the ongoing crisis and challenge to leadership was. The imagined scenario here is one in which Moses and Aaron are not trusted, nor are they given the benefit of the doubt. The leaders of the other tribes imagine that, despite the miracles God has performed through Moses and Aaron, and even specifically through their staffs, The two of them hold on to power only through trickery and deceit. The Midrash paints the leaders of the nation and the rebels they represent as men who don't want to believe that Aaron and the tribe of Levi have been chosen by God. In fact, in their minds, even if it appears that God has chosen them, it must be because they did something nefarious, like pre-sprout Aaron's staff. Only by anticipating this level of pettiness are Moses and Aaron able to maintain the divinely given right of the tribe of Levi to priestly power. Certainly, this explanation paints the people and their tribal leaders in a poor light. However, despite the proof text from Proverbs, I don't think that this scenario reflects well on the leadership of Moses and Aaron either. The narrative of the freshly cut pieces of wood would seem to indicate that Moses is anticipating complaints that have not yet been voiced. He is acting out of paranoia and a lack of trust that would indicate that, in fact, he isn't interested in repairing relationships with the people. Rather, he is more intent on preparing for and avoiding a worst-case scenario. This mutual lack of trust is especially disturbing to consider when we remember how Moses and Aaron initially proved themselves and their relationship to God to the generation of Israelites enslaved of Egypt. Their staffs were the symbols of their power, their trusted tools in enacting miracles. Now, in the eyes of the people, a staff in the hand of Moses or Aaron is reduced to a tool of illusion and trickery. And Moses and Aaron forego their personal status symbols, lest the people come to doubt them further. The writers of the Midrash make a conspicuous and to me a bewildering choice in not expounding a scenario in which it was one of these staffs from Exodus that miraculously sprouted and allowed Moshe and Aaron to hang on to their power. Clearly, in their chosen interpretation of the text, only a few short years after the events that took place in the book of Exodus, the relationship between the people and their leaders is irreparably damaged. This is both a crisis in leadership and a shortcoming in the people, who have abandoned their old standbys of faith in their leadership and their God. The end of the Midrash, however, gives us a potentially more positive spin. The last lines of the Midrash read, "And this same staff, the sprouting staff of Aaron, was in the hand of each and every king until the temple was destroyed and it became lost. And that same staff is destined in the future to be in the hand of the Messiah." It's worth taking a moment to recognize that this supernatural phenomenon, rooted in the natural world and its natural beauty, becomes a lasting symbol unto itself. And yes, it's a symbol of power. It gets co-opted from the priestly line into the line of the kings of Judah, but it's still a symbol of beauty and fragility, buds and blooming flowers that are both an everyday miracle and a supernatural one. Rachel Adler, professor of Jewish thought at Hebrew Union College, writes that the almond tree is distinctive not only in that it blossoms early, but also in that it then rapidly buds leaves, develops new branches, and forms its sustaining fruit, the almond, all before the flower's calyx drops off. Its Hebrew name, shaked, means the early waker, and it may symbolize God's watchfulness or the speed with which God responds. Trees are elders of the living earth. Their rootedness, endurance, and capacity for renewal is a blessing extended to the righteous. The righteous shall flourish like the date palm, tzadik katamar yifrach. The righteous too shall be trees of life. It's telling that this staff is the symbol to be carried throughout generations, a generic branch, not one associated with the dynamism of Moses and Aaron or the destructive might of God's power, but something that gives hope of renewal, regrowth, and blessing.